Joining me now is Brendan Carr, FCC Commissioner, who's called on the government to ban TikTok. So, Brendan, let me start with why you believe the government should ban TikTok. Is it due to the data issue or due to the influence issue? Because I think these are two separate cases, but I'm curious where you see it.
Well, thanks so much. I think it is two main issues. One is national security, and the second actually has to do with mental health, some unique things that we're seeing with TikTok. But on national security, you're right. It's data and it's surveillance. We now have admissions by TikTok, as we just talked about surveilling the specific locations of Americans, as journalists, as well as journalists abroad. We also have evidence now ahead of our most recent midterm election that CCP's propaganda outlets stood up TikTok accounts without disclosing the relationship to the Chinese government and targeted specific U.S. politicians for criticism ahead of the election. We obviously have this investigation ongoing right now. So I do think there's something unique about the amount of data it's collecting and the fact that, according to reporting, it's all being seen inside China, which reveals TikTok's representations to be nothing else than gaslighting.
The algorithm itself, we seem to still not be able to understand or explain the algorithm. This is their special sauce. Nobody's been able to, trust me. You think Zuckerberg wants to have it for Instagram Reels? You think that Google wants to have it for YouTube's Shorts? They don't have it. How important is it for the U.S. government to understand how this algorithm works?
Well, I think you step back from TikTok itself. The CCP have set out the goal of dominating artificial intelligence by 2030. And at the end of the day, this algorithm is part of that. And so another feature of this issue is every time we swipe on a video, every time we comment, every time we hover over something, we are sending data back to Beijing that is feeding, training, improving their AI that could be used down the road for malign purposes. I also think that TikTok is sort of uniquely replaceable when you look at a ban or a potential divestiture, because unlike Instagram or Facebook, you're not building a network of your friends or your colleagues. These are videos, to your point, from an algorithm being fed to you. So I do think that we could replace this once we act based on national security.
The courts are going to, I think, have a hard... It doesn't feel like the U.S. government has enough evidence to make this case. A lot of it's circumstantial, and a lot of it is, sort of, well, they're a bad actor, and we can't trust a bad actor. What evidence do you think the government needs to make sure this makes it through the courts, or do they need to word this more carefully?
I think we're in a really good position right now to uphold a ban or a divestiture. There's a process in place. Obviously, the Treasury Department, CFIUS, has been building a case on TikTok for over 2 years now. And there's precedent for this. They looked at Grindr recently, an application that had some Beijing-based investment. They said we have national security concerns, and there was the forced sale divestiture of that Beijing-based ownership for Grindr. We can do that here. We also have a broader process in place right now. The Biden administration, through an executive order, stood up a process at the Commerce Department that's looking at all applications. So while TikTok, I think, is the lowest of the low-hanging fruit, given the record we have, that's sort of the first one that's working its way through this broader review.
So what would that mean for Telegram, which has Russian government sovereign fund investments, or Twitter, which has the Saudi sovereign fund as an investor?
Yeah, I think all these applications should be run through that process. And I think the way that you're going to get at the next problematic application is we have to show the fortitude to move forward with TikTok, given the record that we have. Again, admitted location spying. We have issues with their testimony here in the U.S. They've said, for instance, that they involve with something called heating, which is artificially boosting certain types of content. And they were asked point blank, has there been heating that's taken place from inside China? They refused to answer. They testified here a couple weeks ago, and they were asked, do you share this U.S. user data with personnel in Beijing that are themselves members of the CCP, and they said they didn't want to get into the political affiliations of people. So I do think we've seen the smoking gun with TikTok. At the FCC, we've done similar things. For instance, we denied China Mobile the right to connect to our networks based on national security concerns. And once we did that, that then allowed us to go after China Telecom, China Unicom. So I think that's the right approach, which we have a process. TikTok's gone through it. Let's move on it, and then let's pick up these other apps.
So this really is a ban on Chinese technology essentially being able to be integrated in U.S. infrastructure. Is that the way to look at this ban?
No, what we've done both at the FCC and in these other contexts is you always look for what I call a plus factor, which is, as of right now, having ties back into China itself is not enough for a ban or some sort of concerted action. You look for additional evidence. We had that with Huawei, we had that with China Mobile, and again, with TikTok, I think we're seeing on a bipartisan basis the evidence is present. FBI Director Chris Wray obviously has spoken out. Democrat Chair of Senate Intel Mark Warner has been a strong leader. He has said that TikTok scares the dickens out of him. And so I think we have the evidence that goes beyond simply it's an app with ties back to China that justifies action here.
Their resistance to divesting, The resistance itself, evidence.
When we went through this a couple years ago, they said that they would refuse to do a divestiture. I do think it's interesting and perhaps telling that Beijing before has attempted to stop that type of conduct. I think it goes to the ties ultimately from CCP to ByteDance back to TikTok. In fact, there was a new research report just out this week from the Australian Parliament, 113-page document that walked through the very close ties between the CCP and ByteDance and the leverage they have, not just for data and surveillance, but also for foreign influence campaigns.
And more importantly, American companies have to abide by CCP protocols to do business in China, correct?
Well, it's interesting. Talk about reciprocity. Right now, Facebook, Google services, Instagram, they're barred already from doing business in China. So I think on reciprocity...
those that do end up having to, like, set up subsidiaries, things like this, aren't they?
So I think we'd be justified to ban it on reciprocity grounds alone, but that's not what we're doing. Again, we've looked at this record of very concerning data flows, and that's what the basis of this action is for. And I've been very pleased to see the Biden administration, again, reported just this week, say ban or divestiture. Obviously, devil's in the details, we'll see, but I think that's the right direction.
All right, but what about one more concern, which is we're worried about the Chinese having all of our data. Why aren't we equally concerned about Mark Zuckerberg having it all?
We should. I think there's a baseline level of concern that I have in this country with all applications, the amount of data that they have. There's work going on in Congress right now to put some better baseline privacy protections in place. We should do that. I just think there's something very unique about TikTok, in part because we can compare it to the sister app that works in China called Douyin. As you know, if you look at the content that's shown to kids in China and Douyin, it's very different. It's science exhibits, museum experiments, educational materials. Here we get things like the Blackout Challenge. We get content fed to young girls that have eating disorder, self-harm content.
That stuff's not allowed there.
Right.
Yeah. It is interesting. I had a friend of mine who was a bit skeptical of all this. Oh, I don't think TikTok's doing what you think it's doing. And then on the Lunar New Year, this person picked up his phone and saw Chi wishing him a Happy New Year on TikTok.
Right.
Suddenly he started to think differently. Brendan Carr, thanks for coming in.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.